And I think, it's so important that different sections within the orchestra, they come together and they create something beautiful. That's such a perfect analogy to how business and operations, we're almost like the conductor, right?
You know, the awesome thing about ops is people can take a ton of different approaches, even if they're, similar problems. And also that a bunch of different roles into ops, we see all sorts of different journeys into it. So Alysson, like, what's the fundamental, what the main pillars of your sales ops philosophy? And how's your life impacted that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I my biggest North Star pillar for how I approach sales operations is I treat whatever department is generally sales, but it can also be finance, it could be marketing, it could be customer support. I treat them as my customer. So I don't work with the traditional customer who's signing a sales order and purchasing the product that we're selling. Therefore, my customer is the sales team. My customer is marketing. My customer is finance or customer support. And when I keep that in mind, when I keep that as kind of the center of whatever work I'm doing, I find that then I'm creating things and rolling out things that have real impact and influence on the team and are more quickly adopted and more successfully adopted. And then with that comes a lot of trust, right? So we're building on this relationship with my customer. I'm showing them that, I'm keeping you at the center of what I'm doing. And then as we continue to roll things out, we get greater trust and faster adoption of the things that we do. So that whole philosophy around my customer is the sales team, that is what I really keep at kind of the center of everything that I do. I found when I stray from that, when I start rolling out things that really just benefit me or that I think are important, that's where things kind of fall flat, or they're more difficult to roll out and show the value of. So I think that's a huge pillar of sales operations in general for me. What comes along with that are understanding, really understanding the business, understanding who are the decision makers that need to be involved, understanding my key stakeholders, and really understanding what's important to them. And then data is always just a really critical part of sales operations as well. I find that whenever I can use data to support any kind of recommendation or change, that I'm able to get buy-in and build on that trust with my customer that much more easily.
Yeah, that's incredible. Okay, so it sounds like for you, Alysson, um, the fundamental thing about ops of relationships, it's the partnerships we have with the organization. So now specifically in a process rollout and adoption question, talk to me about the groundwork for creating those relationships, those communication pieces, and like you said, doing things on the basis of what the sales team need rather than what ops think they need. Tell me how you cross that bridge.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think a huge thing that, is so easy to skip over or cut corners is really that initial part of identifying and defining a process or a change or, filling a gap. And I always say, like, you have to go slow to go fast, right? So you have to take that time in the beginning to really understand, like, do you have the right people in the room and sitting at the table asking those questions? You really understand what is the problem that you're trying to solve and have a good understanding of your why. So why are we doing this? What problem are we trying to solve? And who's my frontline impact, like my main customer, but then also, am I impacting other people's, or is there downstream impact that I'm not considering? And it's so important and critical to really think through that and do your due diligence in the beginning. If you don't do that, it's just so much more painful down the line. And I have learned from that mistake in the past where I was like, I'm just going to roll this out and it's going to be great. And it's like, oops, I completely didn't think about this piece over here and now we're paying for it. So that's a huge part of it. But some of the groundwork that I think is so easy to just kind of skip over or to kind of push through because it feels like we're moving slowly. I want to get going, right? And then Understanding your customer, like I said earlier, is so important, making sure you have the right people in the room and really building on that relationship and making sure that there's trust there. And because I think when you have like a strong connection and there's trust that is really protected and fragile, making sure that that stays intact, then it's going to be easier to communicate the why, like why we're doing this, and people will believe that this is going to be beneficial for them. I think also like having a really good rollout plan. Um, Launch day isn't the end. You have to have a good idea of like, how are we going to roll this out and communicate it to the team, and know what does success look like. So as you're starting to pull together this process change and laying the groundwork and figuring out how we're going to get the team to adopt this, we also need to really understand, when does this look like we've done a good job, like we've been successful at this? And then on the flip side, when do we know that we maybe weren't very successful? Like, did we fail at this, and are we okay with failing? I think it's important to sometimes be okay with failure, but on the other side of that, once you fail, understand how to improve, or like, what do we do from there? Be flexible enough to fail and then move on and make things better. So I think when you talk about groundwork, it's really those sorts of things. So doing your due diligence ahead of time, understanding who your customer is, and really building on that trust. Have a good rollout plan so that nobody's taken aback, or they're caught off guard, or they don't feel like they have what they need to be successful in this. And then understand, what does success look like, and then be okay with failure, because failure it happens to everybody.
Yeah, that's a great overall vision of the process rollout. So we'll dig into the constituent components. Going back to the beginning, so we need the people in the room, we need the key influencers, we need them on board. Now you have this great idea, like you communicated this so well, where you're sharing a vision and you're understanding them and you're using that to influence your process. Now, to play devil's advocate, help the community understand this. Your key piece earlier was, the sales team, they're your customer. You need to be rolling out things that benefit them. But at the same time, like ops sometimes has like a really good idea and handle on something, right? Because they have unique insight into the data, for example, or they can take a step back. Have you ever had it where you don't have to? You can be as specific or general as you want. But have you ever had it where like you've had pushback on something, and you've had to come to a compromise and agreement? How do you handle that, manage that process? What does that look like?
Yeah, it's a really very real situation. So I found the times when I've gotten pushback, or I've made a recommendation to a process, and I had a lot of conviction and I really believed in it, and I got pushback on it, was oftentimes because I didn't fully have a good idea of the full picture. I didn't really do my due diligence and truly understand, how would this impact this other department, or how would this impact their day-to-day, or how does this align with that department's goals? Sometimes like I might see something as like, this is really important and I think we really need to have a good grasp on this. But when I presented it or I made the recommendation, even if I had data that supported it, it may be completely misaligned with that particular department's goals and objectives. And so once I had that context and that clarity, then I can adjust my recommendation so that more aligns with what their goals are. Because at the end of the day, like I said before, it's not about me. It's not about what I necessarily think is best. I can make recommendations, but at the end of the day, they have numbers that they need to achieve. They have goals and objectives that they need to deliver on, and my job is to help them get there.
Yeah. Okay, that's great. Okay, so working alongside this, I love this because it's about the human to human. So let's think about the enablement. And you mentioned earlier, we need to have long-term adoption because it doesn't just stop on rollout day. What are the key enablement considerations you have to consider for long-term adoption?
Yeah, and this is some of my favorite stuff to talk about. So I'm excited to chat about this. So
Yeah.
I think, before you even start, you have to be able to communicate and establish the why. If people don't understand why we're doing something, they're not gonna, they'll go along if like their manager says, yeah, you have to do this and I'm gonna require you to do this, but the adoption is going to be so much more painful if they don't understand why they're being asked to change or why they're being asked to do something additional. So that is absolutely critical, that you have your why and that you can communicate it and you have conviction in it as well. And then it's bonus points is if you have like leadership and higher levels agreement that this is an important and valuable why, and that they back it and support it as well. So I think that is like step one. If you don't have that, you have to start over. you have to have that. And then once you have that and you're starting to roll things out, like I mentioned before, it's really important to have a good rollout plan. And what I have found to be the most successful is understand different learning styles and understand that at the end of the day, we're all human and we have fear, and fear can be masked by things like, I don't want to agree to this change, or I don't want to change what I'm doing because I'm afraid that I'm going to fail, or I'm afraid that I can't hide behind a broken process and it's going to be that I'm the problem. So I think understanding different learning styles and understanding that people are generally just naturally resistant to change because nobody wants to fail, that has to be kind of the lens that you look through when you're building out your rollout and enablement plan. So I think also like having really good quality materials and easy access to the learning materials is important. In past roles, whenever I've rolled out like a major process change or changes to the product that our sales team needed to be like really well versed in, I used an internal learning management system, or LMS. And I found that that was a really good way to roll out any kind of changes to a process or, kind of like a curriculum. And I built that LMS in a way that allowed for, it supported different learning styles. So it would have like a short video, nothing longer than 5 minutes, that would, walk them through the process. Attention spans are short, right? So it would be a short video followed by a really quick quiz and then some kind of hands-on activity, so that we really address different learning styles. So some people really like to just watch someone else do it. Some people need to be, test their knowledge. And then I think the most important part is giving people a chance to actually practice before going into the real world. I think also using an LMS is a really nice way to deploy information and a curriculum to people regardless of where they are located, especially during, like a pandemic when we're not sitting in the same physical room as each other, or if you have a team that is across the US or across the world, having all this information available and accessible on, a digital space or, like an LMS just helps with, people can learn at their own pace and during their own time zones. I think also just having like a strong cadence is really important, to make sure that the rollout goes well. So give people time ahead of the game day, like go live day. In the past, I worked at a company where we were shifting from Salesforce Classic to Salesforce Lightning. And I wanted to make sure, my team, they understood like an opportunity is an opportunity, a lead is a lead, but every page is going to look different in Lightning. So I built out some trail mixes on Trailhead and allowed them that would just get them used to this new layout, this new experience, made that available to them and gave them 3 weeks to complete it. There goes my husband. I share an office with my husband. So if you see someone walking behind me, this is our pandemic situation. So we share.
Pandemic special, no worries.
That's right. Poor guy. And he's got to deal with me every day.
Yeah.
Sometimes he wears like earbuds and then the big headphones because I'm in meetings all day. And we still really like each other. Isn't that amazing? Even though we're in the same like 8x10 room all day.
That's love.
So anyway, So yeah, I gave them like plenty of ramp up time before go live day. No one's caught off guard. Everyone, that gives people a chance to like kind of get their toes wet, right? And then we have like a good game day, plan. Small group instructions really helpful. People will be more willing to ask questions when they're not in a big group. Give them a chance to practice and just create an environment where they can ask questions. No question is a dumb question, and just, I think that's really important. Otherwise, people just shut down or they take, go shopping on Amazon while you're trying to explain things to them. And then I think the thing that is so easy to just blow off and not consider is the post-launch support, right? So you've got your game day, you've rolled everything out, we're living in this new world with a new process or a big change to the product or something like that. I think it's so important to continue to provide support and training and education after you go live. Office hours are a great thing. So we use Salesforce knowledge articles internally within Salesforce. So if they're on a certain stage and they get stuck, they've got an article right there. We use Slack channels for questions. And then I think it's just really important to be available and be patient. People learn at different paces. And I think it's just so important. If you don't give them an opportunity to ask a question and maybe be vulnerable, they're just going to go and use it in a way that they may understand in an incorrect way or just not adopt it in general. That was a lot. It's a lot of information, but I think all those sorts of things are really important when you're thinking about how to roll out a new process and get good adoption.
That's incredible. I want to go back to one thing you said in particular, and that's different learning styles, because I know, Alysson, also, you're involved in music, right?
Yeah, I am.
So like from what you described, I just couldn't stop thinking this. It's a bit like you have a band and everyone might learn their music in different ways. Some people might do sheet music or read music. Some people might just listen to it, but overall it all comes together into a unison sound. And I don't know, do you think there are any like similarities between learning in music and playing in together in a band or orchestra and ops and how people learn in their reps, or do you think that's a nonsense?
No, I love that. I never thought of that, but I love that. I think that's such an interesting way of looking at it, because absolutely. I mean, I really like that analogy. I think that's really smart. I think back to like how I learned, like, so I started in music playing the piano when I was a really little girl, and just thinking through like how I learned it, and it was very much like repetition, and you do things over and over again until it's just like ingrained in your brain. And then once I started to get older and I joined like orchestra, or like in college and stuff like that, and I joined orchestra or choir. So funny that we're talking about this. I didn't think this was where the interview was going. I love talking about music, like learning how my part, fits in with the larger symphony, or, how, and then just also having like a stand partner who learns very differently. And, it doesn't just learn great through like repetition and playing things over and over again, but learns through context and learns through, understanding the theory behind the music and everything like that. And I think, it's so important that different sections within the orchestra, they come together and they create something beautiful. That's such a perfect analogy to how business and operations, we're almost like the conductor, right? And bringing these different departments together and, breaking down silos and making sure that things flow together to create something really beautiful. I like that. That's really good.
Nice.
That's really good.
Well, you said something there about, learning through context. And you also mentioned data a bit on this, in this call. Talk to me about how you use data to create the context for a new process and how that's rolled out.
Yeah, so I think data is so critical, especially when building that trust, right? And understanding your why. I think in order to, get backing behind a process change, or bringing on a new tool, or investing in, either time or resources in, changing something, you have to have like a very strong ROI in order to get leadership to back it and to find the dollars and the resources to, enable this change or to support this change. I think that's just so critical. And if you don't have a good ROI, you don't have a strong why, right? So, and then it's just really difficult to get trust and to really identify that problem. So for an example, in 2 companies now, I've brought on Conga Composer and Conga Sign, just to support our document generation and e-signature process. I've done that in 2 different organizations in my career, and I was able to gain approval because I was able to identify an issue around efficiency and the customer experience. So looking at the data in Salesforce, I was able to see like, okay, how much time are we spending in different stages? Which opportunities are we losing during the signature stage? How many contracts are we losing during the contract signature stage, or things getting lost within the process, right? I was able to actually use data to identify these different areas where things were getting stuck, or like sticky points. And then I was able to point to things that we weren't able to capture. So it's almost like the absence of data was also really important for me to make this request or this business case. So we were really missing insights on like, if we are sending the contract to a certain contact within within an organization, is that really our general champion that we should be going after when we're doing our prospecting, versus, contracts that, how many contracts are sitting in a certain stage for, or, sitting in with the customer for signature, and how long is that taking? And then on top of that, we've got human error, right? Whenever we're sending contracts manually or pulling together contracts manually, we have mistakes, and we're able to pull data or point to the absence of data in order to build our ROI. So when you do that, and you can show how it impacts a bottom line using an ROI analysis, it's so much easier to get buy-in from leadership, and then also to translate that during the rollout to like, okay, sales rep, I'm telling you, you are going to save 8 hours waiting on me to pull together a sales order for you. You now own this process, and you can send out the sales order whenever you are ready for it, once it gets approved. And you can see exactly where your sales order is sitting, versus having to follow up with your customer and say, hey, did you get this? Did you get a chance to sign it and send it back to me? It impacts efficiency. It also impacts the customer experience, right? We're a tech company, for Pete's sake. We should be sending our sales orders in a way that they can sign it electronically. So I think data is so important to be able to build your business case from the beginning, but then also leveraging that information to get the my customer, right, the sales team, to adopt it. And then on top of that, you can start to think about, okay, when are we successful? Are we able to actually decrease our turnaround time for contracts by what percentage? Is it by 50%? Is it by 100%? Like, that would be great, and how many contracts are we able to churn through and get out the door, and how many of them have those human errors or those mistakes? So using that data, it takes you through the entire process from, getting approval to rolling it out to measuring your success.
That's awesome. Alysson, there's one quote from there: if you don't have an ROI, you don't have a strong why.
Yeah, exactly.
That's got to be the quote of the interview. I absolutely loved it. Yeah.
Go for it. Yeah, I think it's a good one.
Yeah, nice. Did you have 5 more minutes just for 1 or 2 more questions? I know we went over a half hour. Yeah, great.
Absolutely.
Thank you. I was just really enjoying this, and yeah.
Oh, me too.
So, my next question, Alysson, is if you're in a room full of sales ops and rev ops superstars, what would you ask them?
Oh my gosh, that is such a good question. Oh man. Okay, I would ask, what was your biggest, let me think about this. Okay. I would ask, what's the one thing that you've learned from the most early in your career? And what is the thing that has helped you be successful to where you are today? How have you changed from, just getting into sales operations versus who you are today, and what got you from A to B? That's what I would ask.